So there I was on Amazon.com doing my daily search for more JRPGs to buy, even though I have an entire backlog of games I still need to finish. And as I'm scrolling, I come across this game that's on sale called Thymesia for PS5. And I'm looking at it and it says a Soulslike, and I get all happy because I love my Souls games. And I'm like, this is such a good price. I gotta try this out. A PS5 physical as well, I'm super joyed. This game was developed by Overborder Studio and published by Team 17, and the only thing I know from them is the Worms games, so funny enough, I was like, hey, I actually know them. Now, here's the thing with Souls-likes or other genres that have sub-genres. They can get very stale or samey. Now, whenever I try a Souls-like, I hope they take the foundation and they do something new with it, to their own little twist on it, have their own spark, because when things start just copying each other, it gets really boring, and now Souls has a very fun formula that works for a lot of action RPGs, and it makes sense that there would be a lot of Souls-likes. Now, with Thymesia, it was actually surprising to see how much of this they took and did their own twist with it while still being very fun. Now, there is some jank that I'm going to go over and with the negatives, but the game as a whole definitely surprised me. Now, this is mostly a positive video, so I'm going to start with the negatives. And with indie games or AA games, sometimes there's jank that, in my opinion, ruins the presentation, and the devs should really look at ironing stuff like this out because it really helps make the game just look really pristine. When you're running around this game sometimes, like if you go into a wall or something, your head is just going to clip straight through it, and it makes me laugh my ass off. So when you're also doing takedowns and these scenes that look really high quality, sometimes if you're near an object or wall, you'll clip into that as well. Not the biggest deal in the world, but it does take out of the immersion sometimes and is kind of funny. Things like this, I honestly think, are important to iron up when you're crafting a game. Now, the other slight problem with the visuals is on PS5, the game runs great and it looks really crisp, but the pop-in for some reason is bad. Like sometimes even weird patches of grass will pop in. It makes no sense. This game is not taxing at all and I'm on a PS5, so it's really weird. The other small negative is the story. Now, I say small negative because there is probably some people who will get into the story and find some interest in the lore. But for me, there's no voice acting, one. And the pages and notes that you read are too scattered around. Like every item you pick up is almost always a big note to read. And it's just too much. It kind of ruins the pacing at times. Sometimes I just want to run through, grab the items real quick, not have my screen pause to tell me a whole backstory. And then while there is some nice cinematic scenes to lead you into a boss fight, during the boss fight, their quotes are just subtitles at the bottom. You don't hear them. And most of the time, when you're in the flow of battle, you are not going to pay attention to that or even see it. That's where the negatives end for me, though. If you enjoy Souls-likes or Souls games for their combat, their environments, their bosses, this game is definitely going to be for you, and I'm going to go into each of the reasons why I think so. Keep in mind, this game is considered an action RPG, and I think all action RPG fans would enjoy this type of combat and gameplay, although it is a Souls-like in the sense the difficulty is pretty high up there, you can't change it, there's a way to lose your XP, all that stuff. Now, really quick, I'm going to give you a snippet of gameplay so you can kind of tell what's going on and how the gameplay looks when no one's talking. I wanted to show some raw gameplay because I honestly think this game looks pretty incredible in motion. Honestly, kind of cinematic, and a lot of it is totally player controlled and the combat flows really well. So you have your basic mechanics. Your R1 trigger is going to do your basic attack string, and you can get upgrades to make this go longer. You have your dodge button, which is really snappy, and then you can make it a double dodge or a double dodge that takes you even further. Now, the main gimmick with this game is you're going to be doing injuries on your opponents, which basically means you're going to take down this green bit on their health bar, and then to actually take off chunks of their health, you have to use your R2 trigger to do your claw attacks. Claw attacks are basically a whole nother combo string that are a lot heavier and slower, and you could also upgrade it to give it more swings. And basically when you do this, you're going to chunk off the damage that you injured on your opponent. If you do not hit them with your claw in time, they're going to regen that health. And this brings such an interesting pace because you can't just go in there, spam a bunch of combos or hit the enemy a bunch of times and leave it at that. You have to time when you're going to go in there with your claw and basically suck out all the health out of the enemy. Now, if you attack them enough with your normal weapon, you will eventually take down some of their injury health. But the thing is, the claw is going to take so much more of it that you're pretty much going to be learning to go back and forth between these combos. And another thing is you can block, but what is much more viable is your parry, because your parry is also going to inflict injuries. So it's kind of like Sekiro, where you're actually going to be doing damage to the enemy the more you parry them. So you're going to go from normal attacks to parries to taking your claw and chunking their health off. Another reason this game honestly reminds me of Sekiro is there's a lot of ways to counter your enemy. A lot of combat mechanics kind of thrown at you, and you could use all of them, but honestly some might brush past you and you might not utilize all of them. For example, some enemies will wind up to do a big attack and it will have this giant green line. When that happens, you have to do a dagger throw where you'll chuck a little dagger at them and they'll stop their combo. Or you could learn an ability where you push dodge right into them and you'll jump up on them and fly down and slam them. So there's multiple ways you can kind of go about an enemy and their moveset during a boss fight. The other giant gimmick with this game, and where most of my fun came in, are the plague weapons. Now, the plague weapons are all these type of ghost weapons that you can use, and the way you get them is stealing them from your enemies. Every single enemy type in this game, including bosses, can be stolen from. You basically hold your R1 trigger to do a super claw, and you usually have super armor through this so they can't knock you out of it. And you'll grab them, take their weapon, and you have it for your own. This goes in the form of shields, where you could do a special type of parry, spears you could chuck at them, claws, a whole bunch of stuff. And it's extremely fun going through the game, finding new enemy types and being like, okay, what does he have? And then when you get it, you see the new animation, what it does. And each of these plague weapons are really distinct. They did not be lazy with this. Like, they made each of them really distinct, do their own things, and from what I've played, most of them are useful. Now, I honestly think the parry shield is one of the best ones, if not the best one, because it just gives you a whole nother mechanic to use against bosses, but everything works good, and you could go around upgrading them. And the upgrading them is kind of a fun grind. You just go towards the enemies where you got them from, beat the shit out of them, take their gems, and then you upgrade it. It's all really fast, snappy, and just a lot of fun. That's where most of your fun is going to be coming in with this game. Now, the environments, thank God, are decently designed. Too many Souls-likes have a problem where the areas are actual hallways, and they don't take one of the best aspects from Souls, the environmental design and level design. So in this game, I'm happy to say it's pretty good and complements the game well. You're going to have shortcuts, you're going to have branching paths that aren't just one separate hallway from the other. You're going to have special items that are hidden in good areas. It's not incredible by any means, but it's not terrible, and I really appreciate that because it really goes with a Souls game. You don't just want combat. Like, we all want the great combat, and we're doing that most of the time, so it needs to be 100% fire. But when it comes to level design, it complements it great, especially in a game where you're exploring. The game's soundtrack is actually pretty good too. A lot of Souls games don't even have music, and Souls-likes usually branch out with that and have soundtracks and music going along. This game has good eerie music when you're exploring, and then boss fights actually have some bangers. There was like 2 in particular I wanted to listen to even after I finished the game. So part of the story is you're going back through your memories to discover something. Each of these levels you go to is part of your memories, and when you die it says memory interrupted. But there's around only 4 main areas you're going to go to, but the good thing is there's subquests in each of them, and the subquests take you to different areas, have own distinct bosses, and even distinct enemies. So this is all really good. It makes the game feel decently longer than it actually is, and it is pretty short. It is an indie game, but it makes it feel somewhat more branched and open when you could go back to the areas you went to that weren't originally too small, but then you get to new areas within that and you're like, okay, wow, this area is bigger than I thought it was. And you get to the end and you see a boss that you did not fight in the main story section of that area, and you're like, oh, what the hell? And it has just as much effort as a normal main story boss. Now, you could say they just took out main story sections and made it side quests to kind of pad it out, but the whole way the game works, I think, is pretty nice. And you got your own little nice hub, and this is relaxing to go to give yourself a break from the main areas or subquests. You could just go and think what you want to execute next. So I think the flow of the game is pretty good. Honestly, the only time the flow is mixed up is when you're grabbing too many items and they want to tell you too much the story in that. Because you know how Souls, you'll get items with like a bunch of XP in them and you just want to pop them all real quick. You go and pick those up, and they decided to put story lore notes, like total Word document paragraphs, in each of these items you pick up, which just was not a good idea in my opinion. When you're going to try to tell a story using environmental details, it has to be executed way more intelligently. You can't just put it on every item you pick off the ground. The bosses, on the other hand, told a way better story. When you go into the boss arenas, they're really nicely detailed, and there's a good balance between giant monsters and humanoid bosses, and each of their moves are very reactable. All of it is totally fair, and there was only like a couple times that it felt like a little janky, but it was like one ability for like a giant boss or something like that. Each of the times I went into a boss fight, it was the most fun I had in the game. It was like a dance, it was super challenging, I loved it to death. Some of the takedowns too had really good cinematics and like camera angles. They felt like AAA budget sometimes. Other times they didn't, but there was a few of them where I was like, this is so sick. Overall though, my experience with Thymesia was surprising. I bought this game randomly, and I did not expect to enjoy it this much. A lot of Souls-likes do not grab my attention, especially not nearly in the way a normal Dark Souls game does. But with this game, the combat had something there. It was so solid that I have to recommend this game to any Souls fan. It's a Souls-like that has its own thing going for it, while feeling like something you've played before. All of it is going to give you definitely a fun time in the way of its combat, and I hope you guys can maybe find something with the story. I didn't, but I honestly think that's one of the game's flaws. It just did not tell its story very well. But if you're going for gameplay, especially Souls-like gameplay, you have to try Thymesia out. It's always going on sale, I see too, on Steam, and I'm pretty sure it's on the Switch, but that might be cloud, and I definitely can't recommend that. I'm really curious if any of you guys have heard or played this game. Let me know in the comments, and if you end up getting the game because of this review, definitely come back and let me know what you thought of it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you enjoy my reviews, JRPG content, action RPG content, definitely subscribe, as I have a whole bunch of more banger videos in the works, and I appreciate you guys so much. As always, having a fantastic rest of your day or night. I will see you next time. Peace.